I'm so excited. I was working on my modules here and I checked my email and look at the email I received. It says, beneficiary, this is to officially inform you that we have verified your inheritance fund and found out you've not received your fund of $12.5 million. Why am I teaching here? I just got $12.5 million. I'm going to get it through my ATM. I just have to send Philip Uku my name, address, and direct telephone number. So if this is the last module that I do, you'll know it's because I just got $12.5 million, and why on earth would I keep doing this? Well, turns out it was a hoax. Can you believe that? Well, guess I'll keep teaching the class. Obviously it was a hoax. That's what we call, it's typically called a 419 letter for Nigerian fraud, called Nigerian fraud because many of them in the past were believed to originate out of Nigeria, and 419 is the law that's used in Nigeria to guard against those type of fraudulent emails. So I get them in my junk email every now and then, and we'll talk about why that is and how those offenses are carried out later. But let me just point out that fraud, in the general sense, means using deception to steal items. And fraud has evolved over time, and people have used deception to steal for as long as history, that people deceive others in order to get things from them. So cyber fraud simply refers to using cyber technologies to deceive individuals and steal from them. And we've had different types of fraud over time, as I've noted, but they can be quite simple. They could be quite complicated. Depends on who's doing it, why they're doing it, where they're doing it, and those sorts of things. I remember reading about a fraud, for instance, that it was claimed that if you pay this money, you're going to get a clothes dryer that uses absolutely no electricity. Imagine that. Just cut down your costs of electricity. So the person paid, and they got a clothesline and clothespins. That is fraud. That's deceiving to get other people's money. So fraud's different from robbery in many different ways. Robbery is using force or threat of force to take someone's property from them. Cyber fraud, there's no force used. No physical force. Also, the average robbery costs right around $1,000, according to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Now, many of those target convenience stores and businesses. Cyber fraud can escalate into the millions. It's definitely a couple 100,000 in terms of the average loss when businesses are attacked, but definitely a higher loss in cyber fraud. There's no physical contact when you commit a cyber fraud. It occurs in cyberspace, whereas a robbery, there's actual physical space. And there's also no weapon used, especially in cyber fraud. There's no weapon, although some may say that technology is being turned into a weapon, and technology and whichever type of technology is being used has become the weapon of choice in cyber frauds. There's several varieties of cyber fraud that we can consider. Internet fraud is one of those, and there's different varieties of internet fraud. With internet fraud, it could be that schemers create an auction fraud. If you're trying to auction something off or buy something in an auction, and maybe it's my ODU mug that I want to auction, I want to buy in an auction. And so I try and put in my bid, and I bid $2, and I really want this, and I'm willing to go up to $10, but I'm going to start at $2. Well, in a scheme, a conspirator might drive up my bid, and might bid $3. So then I go to 4. Then the conspirator goes to 5, and I go to 6, and so on. And that conspirator is working with the person selling the mug simply as a way to drive up the cost. Now, if I don't go all the way up to 10, then maybe they contact me and say the other person dropped out, so here, how about this? And the point is, it's not a legitimate way to engage in an auction. There's also different varieties of prime and online sales, things like not delivering the goods that are sold, overcharging for goods, providing counterfeit goods. In fact, the FBI's cybercrime unit actually focuses on both cybercrime and counterfeit distribution, because so much counterfeit, so many counterfeit products are actually distributed through online sales, and the FBI tries to control that in their efforts, along with responding to hacking and malware introduction and so on. So crime and online sales could range from simply we think we're going to get a treadmill, and I order a treadmill and the treadmill never shows up, or they tell me they're giving me the Gucci product, and what it is a product they got from the Dollar Tree, and they sewed a Gucci label on it. That would be a type of crime and online sales. It would be a type of cyber fraud. There's also email frauds and scams, many of them. There's phishing mass emails that are sent to a number of people trying to get that person to do something, and that fraud that I showed you would be an example of a phishing fraud. And these are convenient for the offender because they can send out thousands of them at once, and just getting 1 or 2 people to respond is a successful offense for the offender. There's also work at home scam emails. Maybe you've got those where people are emailed and told, if you work at home, we have a job for you. You can work at home. Now, the way it's a scam typically is they're told you have to buy this kit that helps you set up your own business. And once you buy that kit, the home business doesn't actually follow through. The lottery scams are also part of these email scams. That you won this money, same as the inheritance scam. And again, you only need 1 or 2 people to bite, and once they bite, then it's the offense can carry on. Now, as part of those scams, there's also, it's not noted on the slide, but what's called the recovery room scam, where offenders are targeted, victims are targeted, and the initial phishing email would be sent out to everyone. And phishing, they get someone on the hook. They reel them in, they get them to give money, and then the person is victimized. I give a couple $1,000s, or even thousands of dollars to this thing that I think is legitimate, but it's a scam. Well, in the recovery room scam, what happens is I then get another email, and it's a form of what we call spear phishing, because I'm targeted specifically in this email, and it says, I am so-and-so from the FBI, and we've learned that you've been ripped off. Well, it's not actually the FBI emailing me, but it's the scammer. And the scammer says, we know you've been ripped off, and what we're going to do is we're going to give you your money back, but you have to pay taxes on it. We're sorry about that, but that's just the way the law is written. So if you want your money back, give us $1,000, and then we'll give you the $20,000 back. Person knows they've been scammed, but they want that money back. They write that check, send that money for $1,000, and then it turns out they don't get the money back. Romance scams, another type. These are sweetheart scams, and it might include things like catfishing, where through the internet people pretend like they're someone else. So I think I've got this wonderful future bride that I'm communicating with, and I'm sending her money, but it turns out it's just someone that doesn't intend to marry me. Might be someone that knows me, might not be someone that knows me. But they lure me in, they pretend they're someone that they're not, and then I end up sending them money because I want them to come marry me, or I want them to be well, and I'm actually not sending that to anyone that would be a bride. It's a criminal. Extortion is when through this romance scam, perhaps a married person engages in behaviors that their spouse wouldn't be too proud of, or the partner wouldn't be too pleased with. So after they've engaged in those cyber behaviors, the offender goes back to the victim and says, give us some money, or we're going to tell your partner that you engaged in these behaviors. Theft is when this sweetheart scam and romance scam, they simply steal from us. They get access to our resources and take them. Nigerian frauds are the 419 frauds that I mentioned, and these types of things would include the email distribution, the mass emails, and again, in the past, many of them originated in Nigeria, so that's why they're called Nigerian frauds. Identity theft is when someone steals my identity and commits fraud using my identity, and then it becomes cyber fraud when maybe they get my credit card information, so they buy things online using my credit card information, using my identity, and it could be something as big as the buying large products, people bought automobiles and homes and those sorts of things that through their cyber interactions. And in fact, one person even managed to sell an airport. Yeah, an airport. Through these false identity and cyber schemes. And then there's technology schemes. Technology schemes are schemes that it would entail contacting and offering someone some technological help. You may have had this happen where something pops up on your computer is broken, it's frozen, call Microsoft for help, here's the number. That isn't Microsoft, it's a scam. And it could be done through the internet, it could be done over the phone, and whatever it is, we certainly don't respond to those types of offers. There's certain patterns we can talk about with cyber fraud. They're international in scope. They can happen anywhere and go anywhere. There's what's called entrepreneurial crime. This was briefly mentioned when we talked about white-collar cybercrime, but this is when frauds that appear to be legitimate businesses are illegitimate, and they're set up simply to commit crime. So it combines the phrase that comes from David Friedrichs. It combines the phrase entrepreneur and con. So it's a business that is built on illegitimate principles. And within these cyber frauds, whether they're entrepreneurial or other types of cyber fraud, they happen because of trust violations. They happen because of trust violations. I'm trusting you because I trust you. I'm giving you my money in response for something, or I'm giving you access in response for some item or some good. And that trust is what the offenders will play on. Also, the cyber fraud pattern is they target many, many people at once, whereas typical robberies, you can only target one or a small group of individuals at once. With fraud, many victims are targeted and chosen as potential victims, and depends on the type of fraud and who's chosen, how many respond. Also, significant technical knowledge is not required. Any of us could catfish someone. Hope we don't. Any of us could set up an account in eBay and sell something that doesn't actually exist. I hope we don't. So there's not a lot of technical knowledge required for cyber frauds in comparison to other types of fraud. 2016, there were 300,000 complaints of cyber fraud received by the FBI, totaling $1.3 billion in losses. That's a lot. That is certainly a lot.